Stadia. Lack of games, lack of features, broken promises, awful business model, an over-reliance on fast and stable internet, and flaws to the streaming tech. Does that about sum it up? Yeah, I think that about sums it up. And then beyond that, there's just been a lack of communication and exciting announcements. So this Reddit user pointed out a couple days ago that Stadia has officially gone 40 days without a new game announcement or release, feature update, or real community update. Now this was posted 6 days ago, so today it'll have been 46 days since we saw any kind of new game announcement or feature announcement. So yeah, things are looking pretty dry out there in the Stadia desert. Previously, we did get a response from a Google community manager who basically said, "Oh, we hear you, we're listening to feedback. I'll take this back to the Stadia team." Now, we shouldn't shoot the messenger. They cannot relay what they don't know. It's up to the Stadia team to tell the community managers what to tell the community, and the Stadia team just hasn't done a good job at that, or they just have so little in the pipeline that they are unable to relay any kind of substantial or exciting information. But this was sort of where we were at. The Stadia team had also relayed that Guild and Metro Exodus will be added to the free games library of Stadia Pro, joining these 5 other games. But these are still sort of older titles that have been out for a while now, so it's not that exciting. And then they did promise here 10 games in the first half of the year that will be exclusive to Stadia when they launch, so timed exclusivity, and then more than 120 games coming to Stadia in 2020. But we're already in February 2020, and there's 0 updates on the 120 games or the 10 Stadia timed exclusives, and it all just paints a grim picture for people who want to be hopeful about Stadia, but Stadia is making it very difficult to do so. And that brings us to today's story. Google has responded to the lack of updates on those 120 games and people's concerns that Stadia will not be able to provide a constant, steady stream of compelling titles to keep this platform alive. The following information was relayed by news outlet GamesIndustry.biz. When reached out by Games Industry, a Google spokesperson responded with the following statement. "We understand the desire to hear more specifics on the games. After all, that is what it's all about, the games. Of course, not all 120 titles will be announced by the Stadia team, as we leave it up to the publishers to make the announcement about their IP or games and which platforms it will appear on, just as we will do with the exclusive content coming to Stadia. There are a lot of reasons for the time of those game announcements, anything from planned promotions or events, title readiness, proximity to first playable demo, shareholder requirements, etc. We continue to work closely with our publishing and developing partners and are here to support them in all areas. We are excited to share more about some of the exclusive games coming to Stadia soon." So basically, they're saying, it's up to the developers and publishers to make the announcements in the time frame they feel is necessary. And I'm not saying that's necessarily unreasonable, but at the same time, Stadia, you're launching a brand new platform, and you need to have some kind of roadmap, something planned out in terms of a path forward, and relay that path to the gamers, to the people who are intent on supporting your platform. But it doesn't seem like you've really coordinated with these publishers and ensure that you do have a steady stream of announcements and games before launching Stadia. And not only that, Stadia is still lacking a lot of features. It is still just not there yet from a technological standpoint. And there's just so much missing here that, as I've said before, this feels like beta, early access, and this is a sentiment shared by just about anyone who's tried Stadia. And so if you don't have that steady stream of announcements for games or for features, then you shouldn't have released your platform. Or at the very least, you should have released it in a state that was clearly labeled as early access, and you shouldn't be charging money for things like a Founders Edition or things like, $10 a month for 4K 60 FPS. You shouldn't be charging full price for that kind of stuff when we are dealing with a platform that simply is not ready on almost every front. And you as a platform holder have to go out of your way to give some of these games the spotlight by hosting events or press conferences and the like. The fact that there's nothing like that, some kind of Stadia Direct or whatever it is, nothing to really bolster that excitement, tells me that there's just not much there that's prepared, or developers aren't very keen on announcing things on a Stadia-specific event, because maybe they are aware that Stadia doesn't have particularly good reception right now, that it's not the most exciting platform that people are currently compelled by. This is all just conjecture and speculation. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe they'll do a major blowout at some point a little later this year, but for now, things are looking pretty grim for a platform that had a rough launch and has not picked up momentum since. In fact, things have only gotten worse from a critical and reception and general optics standpoint. But the year's still young. We'll see how this all plays out. But even if they do announce all of these 120 titles and some timed exclusives, one has to wonder whether people will ever deem Stadia to be a compelling consumer proposition, given that, the business model sucks. As for how the Stadia community has reacted to Google's response on the precarious situation of Stadia games right now, people are basically saying, so we still got nothing new. There's still no new announcements. This does not inspire confidence, and I would agree with that. There's one user here who spotlighted this quote from the games industry article, stating that a Google spokesperson told GamesIndustry.biz that the Stadia team has in fact been providing weekly updates on the Stadia community forum, as well as monthly recaps on the Google Keyboard blog. On that front, this individual said, not encouraging that they're lying to the media, the implication being that they have not been providing weekly updates. But others noted that Google has technically been providing weekly updates. It's just that not a lot of those updates have had much substance to them. So this user said, hey, playing devil's advocate, but making a weekly update is not the same as saying something new that excites people. I can make weekly updates that always basically said, everything's good, nothing has changed, still planning great things in the future. It would be true that I wrote weekly updates, but they are essentially useless as news because nothing new can be learned from them, and that's sort of what's been going on. Nothing really substantial has been shared, even if the blogs and such do get updated weekly with sort of small minor announcements or little tips here and there about how to take advantage of Stadia best. And don't worry, there's much to look forward to in the future. I'm not saying that every single weekly or monthly update has to be mind-blowing, but they have to paint some kind of picture for what the future holds, especially when Stadia right now is in a state where it just feels so barren. One last thing I'd like to talk about before closing out this video is Stadia's current sales. I previously talked about this article reporting that there have been 550,000 installations of the Stadia app from November 5th to January 13th, 2020. So that suggests that about 550,000 people actually got the Founders Edition. That's what I said in a previous video. Given that, you do need to download and install the Stadia app in order to set up the platform. So this number right here is roughly representative of Stadia's current player base. Now, what I didn't take into consideration last time when saying that, okay, so probably around 500,000 Stadia Founders Editions were sold, is that there's this thing called the Buddy Pass, where a Stadia user can take a code and hand it over to one more person, and they can also engage in the Stadia platform for however many months. If you consider that people have these Buddy Passes to give out, you'll realize that this install base probably also includes those people with Buddy Passes, and that means that the total sales might actually be roughly half of the installs here. It might be closer to like 250,000 or 270,000 rather than 550,000. And then when you consider that the Stadia team actually began to give out a second Buddy Pass to founders back in December 2019, that tells me that the sales were that poor. They had to give out another Buddy Pass to further bolster the Stadia ecosystem. And that also tells me that this stat of 550,000 installs and how that relates to the total number of sales, well, the sales numbers might actually be even lower, given that a significant portion of the installs might come from Buddy Passes, both from that first wave of, founders who had one Buddy Pass and this second wave of extra buddy passes given out to the founders. That cannot possibly be a good sign. That does not really tell me this is a platform that's selling well. And on top of all that, Google is giving away more Stadias for people who sign up for Verizon Fios Gigabit. If you sign up for that internet plan, then you just get a free Stadia Founders Edition, which is $130. And so Google's just really trying to push as many of these units as possible, even if it means practically giving them away. So from the looks of things, it doesn't seem as though the general public is picking up what Google is putting down. The gamers as a whole, they don't find a compelling value proposition here with Stadia, and even among the hardcore Stadia fans, there is plenty of dissent going around in terms of how poorly this launch has been handled, how there's just a lack of games, and how people are growing impatient at the lack of announcements, the lack of features, the fact that this was in fact a beta, an unfinished product sold as a final release. And with the Pro subscription almost up, and with Google not announcing that they're going to extend the Pro subscription for the early adopters who shelled out $130 for a platform that wasn't ready, people are starting to get the impression that this was not a worthwhile investment, and I would flat out argue nobody should get Stadia right now. It's far too expensive, it's far too unreliable, and there's just nothing to play on it, nothing really new and exciting. But, we'll see. Again, the year is young. You never know what sort of announcements we might eventually see. But Stadia has to pick up the slack, or xCloud is going to run them over. Because people are talking about xCloud. There's a buzz surrounding that and the business model and the games that platform is going to offer. Whereas the general coverage of Stadia, not just from myself, but just generally anyone I've spoken to, it all seems relatively middling to negative. I don't know. We'll see. In the meantime, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Stadia's response to the lack of games and people's concerns. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.